Welcome to another edition of Stand Alone, where we go from being ordinary to extraordinary. I think what is so amazing about life is that it's not where we start, it's where we finish, but it also is how we start. We can't neglect the things from the past, but then we have to be able to move forward. And so, as we're doing this, there's a lot of work that needs to go and be done from ourselves and then projected out. And what we're really talking about here is relationships. If you're going to be a top performer in this world, you're going to have to learn how to get along with other people, how to have healthy relationships with yourself. 5 different areas we're going to talk about today. So today I'm having someone with us, Diana Mandell. She is an anti-therapist, though, so I love that. Let's explain what this is. You've been recognized by Forbes, Maxim magazine. You have a book, It's Not Them, It's You. And the reason why I'm so great to have this conversation with you is just radical accountability. And this is my jam. Like, this is what I'm all about. In a world today where it's just so easy, Diana, to push out blame, to say you did this to me. Yeah, okay, but what are you going to do about it? Whatever someone does to you, can we please start taking accountability and then our power back? Because that's the ultimate, shame of being a victim and pushing out that responsibility is you just took all the power out of your life. So if we want to empower people, which is what everyone wants, you want to feel more powerful. Let's talk about relationships today. And an anti-therapist, welcome and thank you for being here. What is an anti-therapist? Why does this whole world of self-help kind of make you sick? And then what are we doing about it to make it better?
So thank you for having me. First off, I appreciate it. And I love having conversations like this. And I can tell you're just as passionate as me. So this will be fun. It's hard to even know where to start. But let's say self-development seems to a lot of people just very corny, very silly, very woo-woo, when it's actually totally required, as far as I'm concerned, to become the best version of yourself. But what's out there in terms of examples makes all of those stereotypes kind of true.
Mhm.
Um, where it's very much like, look in the mirror and give yourself a hug, love yourself and tell yourself you're good looking. I mean, it's just stupid. It's not going to work. We need to rewire our brain. Like, this is a subconscious, thoughts, feelings, beliefs, ideas that we have about our life. We don't even realize we're doing it. So to tell someone to stop doing something or start doing something, it's not going to work, right? Because you would assume that if it were that easy, they do it on their own, right? I mean, everyone would do it if it were that easy. So it's just not that simple. And that's where the corniness and the very surface level conversation comes into play. A lot of people think that I'm just like, do this, this, and this to be more attractive. You know what I mean? And I think that is a lot of what you read out there. That's what all of the articles are. It's what a lot of, YouTube videos are. And they're clickbaity and people like to click on them, but that's not doing the work. So
Yeah.
it's kind of unfortunate on both ends because it's not really helping anyone in theory. So it is about doing the work. It is about taking accountability, like you said, where it's not your fault, most of what's gone on in your life, but it is your responsibility to do something about it. Because if you don't, and we often don't realize it, which is part of the problem, people that say they don't need help are the ones that need it the most, but you're bleeding all over other people with all the choices that you make based on past behaviors, based on generational trauma, which lasts 7 generations, by the way. Our self-awareness, many studies show that we're 10 to 15% of us are actually self-aware. 10 to 15% of us. And I don't even know what that criteria even means. So I think we think, let's say for easy numbers, I'm 40, I've been in my body for 40 years, so I know who I am. You don't, and you don't know how other people perceive you either, which is
Yeah.
not good. So it seems like the blood that we bleed should be bright red, just like ours actually is, but it's not. And that's the sneaky thing. It's like a sneaky bitch, all of our past stuff. And it all makes sense. If you look at anyone's life, from a serial killer, which is very intense and obvious, to an extreme people pleaser to someone with high anxiety to, whatever it is, it's what I call emotional kryptonite. It's like our things that we have to battle against. When you look at those things, it makes total sense when you rewind the tape and go all the way backward to someone's life where it's like this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and that happened. It's all just a string and it all makes sense. When are you going to be that pattern interrupter to stop that, both from a generational perspective and for yourself? Because as we know, so sort of realistically we understand it, but we don't actually psychologically understand it, that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. Yet that's exactly what we're doing all day. So if you want something to be different, you have to be different. And accountability is a lot of it, because let's use a 40 example. I'm 40 years old and I'm doing the same thing over and over. If I'm just interrupting that pattern all of a sudden, of course, it's so easy to revert back to the older version of ourselves because that's familiar, that's comfortable, it's what we know, it's in our comfort zone. So you have to start putting in new things in place, action steps, new beliefs, new thoughts, thinking about the 1.0 version of yourself to the 2.0. And even that, there's iterations after that. But we have to start thinking through of how to up level our lives and where we feel we're weaker in, to fill in those gaps and holes.
Yeah, and I think what's very important is that we start to change our language. And what I mean by this is a lot of us are talking about change today, and change is required. People say change or die, but people don't like change. And this is why I stopped talking and telling people, like, you need to change. What do you agree with this? I start saying, like, you need to start learning how to transform yourself. You need to learn how to start being an entirely different person. And I say things, the same words, like, you are literally wired to be a certain type of person. Now we have to unlearn and relearn an entire new script and then rebuild you accordingly, according to what you want. But the problem with change is that people, I find it like they don't change, they pretend, and then they just revert back to their old selves. So what can you speak about in terms of the difference between change, transformation? Because transforming is hard, it's not easy. It is something you have to do a lot of the work on yourself. Is that why you're called an anti-therapist? What's the reason for that word, anti-therapist?
I really am the therapist that I never received when I was little. I had some trauma growing up, and I went to my first therapist when I was 14. And at the end of the first session, I told her everything that had gone on in my life. It was the first person I'd ever out loud actually spoke everything to.
Wow.
And she handed me a suicide hotline number and said, if you're thinking about killing yourself, call this number because you've got a lot to be sad about. So it started there. And I lasted there for a couple months, and I said to my parents, like, I'm not doing this anymore. It just highlighted, made me feel worse, with with all of the issues that I had. She never made me feel normal. It was sort of like, yeah, you got a lot of shit going on, girl. Like, good luck to you. It was like basically what it was. And to just cover her own ass, to give me the suicide hotline number. It was like, I was never suicidal. I never said I was suicidal. I was sad, I had a lot of shit going on. But I never said that I was suicidal. So it was quite difficult. And then it just came from a string after that. In my 20s, I started going to therapy. I just never found a therapist that I could relate to, that I felt like I could truly trust, that it didn't feel transactional. It didn't feel like there was a power dynamic and sort of like a power struggle that was going on. I felt like 45 minutes a week was ridiculous. I mean, the way that I equate it is like, if I'm needing to lose 50 pounds, do you think that a fitness expert would tell you to go to the gym for 45 minutes a week? It's silly. To your point,
Yeah.
you want to really change your life. That's not going to even remotely cut it. Is it better than nothing? Of course, anything is, right? I'm going to the gym once a week is better than no times a week, sure. But it's not going to do it. Like, you're not going to have a sick body. At the end of that same concept, like, you're not going to have a very clean mind if that's what you're doing. So there were 30 code of ethics that I signed on to become licensed. And I went to school for 6.5 years, only to realize that a lot of it is very antiquated, very silly. When I left my licensing exam, it was a 4-hour exam. You find out immediately whether you pass or fail before you even get, your butt out of the chair. Very unlike, the bar, let's say, for example. So obviously I was incredibly relieved, but then upon kind of letting that sink in, by the time it was in New York City. So by the time my feet were like on the actual ground, I was like, what the hell was that all for? I mean, everything, not even just the exam or the 4 years in grad school, or I'm sorry, the 2.5 years in grad school, the 4 years in undergrad. It was like, what is all of this for? Like, that didn't make me a good therapist. Like, that didn't equate whether I was or I wasn't, it was just very odd. So I just started to really question a lot of what, not only just what therapy is given, but what we're taught to become therapists was the problem. And I went to a top 10 school in the US at the time, and I chose that school on purpose. So it was like, wow, like what are we doing here? And we have
Mm.
people's like lives in our hands. Like we don't have scalpels, obviously, but we have people's lives in our hands, and we're just as important because if you think about it, if someone is brave enough and strong enough to ask for help and they go to a therapist and had a lot of the experiences that I've had, and God knows I was not alone on this because I hear constantly people's stories, like it's possible I'll never go to therapy again. And like that person was failed. I mean, how awful is that, right? Because a lot of people should get therapy. I think everyone should be in therapy, frankly. And because unless you feel like you have it 100% together, and I don't know any of those, I've never met a single person in my life and probably never will. So unless you have 100% together, then fine. But other than that, you need to be in therapy. It just didn't make any sense to me. So I went into like, I just had a very like rock bottom moment. It's in my book. It's a whole thing. We can do that for another call. Um, but I literally at the end of that, I basically had lost everything. Trusted the wrong person, like lost all my money, my business, my apartment, my boyfriend, my best friend who introduced us, like everything, literally everything. And the week before I thought like my life was wonderful, by the way. Um, and I sat on the floor of my apartment that I was about to lose. And I was crying. And I basically said to myself, like, you can either move in with your mother and just sort of exist and be like most people and just whatever, and let your trauma and just sadness and all of that just fester and continue because I couldn't find a good therapist. So it just all sat there, all of my crap just sort of sat there. And all the decisions I made was through the lens of all of those, issues and the heartbreak and the loss and the trauma and just all of it. Or I can decide to become my own client. And I didn't even think it was a good idea. I just didn't know what else to do. I was able to help other people. So why not help myself? So I did it as sort of an experiment, probably more than anything else, because again, I didn't know where else to turn. I'd been through a million therapists. And I created not only action set for myself, which now my clients all do, but I've been in the trenches with my clients. Like I get it, like I get how hard it is. Like you said, there's one thing to, quote unquote change and then revert back with just like the wind blowing in the wrong direction versus saying to yourself, like, there is no other choice. And I promised myself, and I said, if you want to go in the direction of just like living with your mom and existing, whatever, like, cool, do whatever you need to do. But like, that's where you're staying. If you decide you're going this way, and really genuinely working on yourself every single day without excuse, without fail, you are going to do that, right? I mean, you're going to question yourself. You're going to ask for feedback. You're going to do all the hard things that we don't want to do. We're so afraid to ask for feedback because if it's something negative, we think it's something within us. So like we're wrong, we're bad, but it's not true. Like that's how we grow and learn, right? So it's like, how do you decide, like, what do you decide to do, right? I mean, that's the question. How much do you want to see that you don't want to see, if you know what I mean? And go to those darker places. So I did the work and I do it every single day. And to your point, rag to riches stories, whether it's, abuse, it's financial, it's your body. I mean, whatever transformation that we're talking about, we tend to like really dig in the pain. Like I felt really bad and things were really shitty and everything was awful. And then it's like we somehow like paint over the bridge very quickly of just like, but now I'm here and everything's wonderful and blah, 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 right? And it's like no one really knows like the grit and the determination and like what needs to happen. Like one of the things that I tell my clients is you need to double layer your why. Why do this? Why does it matter? Why be the 2.0 version of yourself? And I say double it because a single one is not enough. Like on those days when you want to be like, fuck it all, you know what I mean? And we all unfortunately have days like that where it's like nothing goes right, everything's a mess, etc. That one thing is not enough. And this has to be like deep shit that like makes your whole body like tingle. You know what I mean? When you think about why, right? Like why show up, why do the work? If you have no idea what you're doing, why you're doing it, what the kind of thing behind, what's the drive behind it? Why does it matter? I mean, it's all sticks and stones and it'll all fall down with it just, again, like a little wind coming through. You need to every single day promise yourself that you're going to be the best version of yourself, learn, grow, ask for feedback. And like you said, and it's true, there is a little bit of that kind of like fake it till you make it at first, right? Like if you want to be the 2.0 you, like at some point you need to say, what does that look like? What does that sound like? What does that feel like? What's my life? Get super granular and start showing up as that person. And I did that in my business when I had one client, I had no business to think that I was a boss babe, right? Like I had one fucking client. Um, but I started to do that after like a little bit of time where I was like, I really don't feel great about myself. Like I don't feel confident. And I started to really like think like her, act like her, dress like her, and do things and say no to things that I had no business saying no to because I had no clients, right? Um, but I continually do that to this day. And I have to say that I've probably had maybe 4 clients out of all these years that I could say were kind of like not great. But that's it. And I do this all day, every day for years and years because I always listen to my instincts. And some people, unfortunately, are good at hiding it, let's just say, right? So, like, they seem okay.
How do you get to a client that you get to a conclusion, I don't want to work with you anymore?
And I do, by the way. And that's one thing that's very anti-therapy. Also, I will fire my clients. It doesn't feel good, by the way, and I give them several warning shots. I'm not this, absurd, ruthless person. But if you're not doing the work, I'm going to call you out. I play good cop, bad cop. That's my job, to be a mentor, to be accountable for you, right? Like I don't need to waste my time and I don't need you to, waste your own. It doesn't make sense. And I don't need the money that bad, thankfully. So at the end of the day, it's if you're not showing up, you're not doing the work, or a lot of my clients will show up, but they haven't done it and it's just excuses. Oh, I got busy. Oh, whatever. I don't know. I don't know what that means, right? I mean, like I said to you, when I was at that rock bottom moment, you need to convince yourself that every day it matters. I was on vacation. It was the holiday. I had to travel for work. I mean, with love, I don't give a shit, right? Like the quality of your life doesn't wait for you to just have nothing going on. It's never going to happen, right? Like I always say to my husband, I'm going to slow down. He's like, when? I'm like, I don't know. It's like you make room and time for like what you make room and time for. And we
Yes.
always make room and time for the things, people, experiences that are important to us. We know that. So you got to stop with the excuses. It's scary, right? I'm not going to say this is just like easy peasy and you can just kind of, walk right in. It's work. It's not the easiest thing in the world. But to me, I would rather die trying than never do anything at all. Because again, when I see people like that, when I see people in their 70s and 80s, even family members, I'm like, that's the kind of life I don't want to live. And I don't care what their title was, how much money they made, where they live, what they look like. I don't give a shit, right? If I know for a fact that that person's not happy and I have this sort of intuitive way of seeing things, a blessing and a curse. Like, no, thank you. Right. I mean, every day is an opportunity to learn, to grow. And that is being humble and saying, I don't have all the answers. I don't know everything. And you need someone, in my opinion, an outside source who is not involved, who will not repeat anything, who will not judge you, who will not, like, who am I to judge? Like, I've done the stupidest shit in the entire fucking world. And I never did like drugs or drinking or anything else, but I attracted from professionally, socially, romantically, like some of the worst. So I am not here to judge a single person. And all
So
of it
why
has
does
to do
that
with your
happen? Like
trauma.
why do good people attract bad people to them? Or are we bad people that think we're good and we are attracting exactly what we are?
It's kind of a mirror situation, interestingly. So if you take a people pleaser, right, who's more of a fragile person who doesn't think that they're enough, they're going to attract someone who overinflates their ego, though narcissists, for example. And again, we're definitely watering down like that whole word. There are assholes and there's narcissists. Those are two very different people, right?
Yes.
But a narcissistic person who will take advantage of that person who doesn't feel enough, right? It's like they almost have like the opposite thing, even though at the end of the day, it's all insecurity based. And interestingly, the narcissist is more insecure than the people pleaser, right?
So is this a predator prey relationship?
Kind of, yes. And
Mhm.
interestingly, they both kind of feed off of each other because the people pleaser over here is attracted to the narcissist because obviously the narcissist is attracted to them because they know that they can control them with, in 5 seconds. But then the people pleaser is attracted to the narcissist because look how confident they seem, right? They're
Yeah,
so
like they
decisive. They're
want that
so
for themselves.
exactly
Yeah.
right. And that's why, in theory, the most confident person in the room is the one that people are attracted to the most, not even sexually attracted, but just attracted because they're like, I want that. Like, why is that person, like so cool? Like, what's the deal? So part of it's mystery and part of it is intrigue. right? Because it's like, I want to be like that. All of us have insecurities. Some hide it better than others, right? And it comes out in different ways. But whether you're an overthinker, a people pleaser, a victim, a narcissist, right? All of the kind of different archetypes, sort of personality traits, obviously they come out very differently, and externally it's very different, but internally it's all a case of I don't feel enough. None of us do in certain areas. So I'll have some clients that financially do incredibly well. They make millions a year and have an incredible title, et cetera, but they'll be on their fourth, fifth, whatever marriage, literally. Right. So it's like the intellect and the emotional intelligence don't always interconnect. And oftentimes they actually don't, believe it or not.
Yeah. So, uh, can the 2.0 version of you get to a place where you are aware of these dynamics and relationships and then see it coming, know yourself, and then say, I don't want that. I'm walking away from that. I'm going to look for something better.
That's what I did. And that's what I teach people to do because partially because of me doing that for myself. But it takes effort, it takes time, it takes intention, it takes being proactive, it takes maintenance. A lot of people are reactive. So they'll wait and wait and wait and wait and wait until everything is so bad in their life that they feel like they have to do something now. Right. So I'm very big on proactivity, but 100%. I mean, again, it's up to you in terms of how you want your life to look, but you got to do the work. But it's really making the decision that's like the hardest part, which feels like it shouldn't be, but you got to be all in. You can't put one toe in. So, to the question that you had before, the type of clients that I just won't work with either from the beginning or kind of midstream is someone who's just not willing to do the work and it's just excuses. And again, this stuff is scary. But to me, again, it's scarier to not do the work and look back on your life. Like that's what the regret is. It's not I should have worked more. I should have made more money. I should have, gotten that car. And it's none of that stuff. It's all about relationships. And at the end of the day, if you want your legacy to live on after you die, that's the people that had relationships with you. If they have nothing to say about you, I mean, you're kind of dead and gone, and that's pretty much the end of you because there's nothing to share. Right. There's no stories, right? That like last generations upon, you know what I'm saying? Like that's the way that you live on, even when you're off this earth. That's up to you. Like you want to leave a legacy, like how, and I think people think about that when it's like close to too late or actually too late, right? Like people on their deathbed, they have all those regrets, the things that mattered and the things that felt important don't feel that way anymore.
I think it's also important to reflect on, this is where people get lost. You have to care what people are going to say about you in the end. But then while you're doing the work, you've got to be able to shut out the noise and, get in this space of it's not that you don't care of other people's opinions about yourself, but you've got to position yourself to get strong enough to then be able to build into that version of what you want people to be able to say that you were to them, not necessarily your accomplishments, but how did you make people feel? Were you a generous spirit? Did you come into a room and like make a positive impact? Did you bring light to the room? Or were you just a dark creature? Because we have some of those crawling around.
Oh, we have them.
So
Do we
what's
have them?
going on? Like what, let me ask a question. Are we just hyper aware in today's world because we have access to more information? Were people always this way? Or is something in the air right now that's making people a little bit more crazy?
I
And
think a
what,
little bit of both.
okay,
I think everyone's kind of been a bit crazy. I think it's now just a flashlight has been,
okay,
shown on it. So I think it's been there, though again, when you look at social media, it's like a beautiful thing and a horrible thing all at the same time. Like none of these things
yeah,
existed,
yeah,
30, 40 years ago. There was no social media, there were no reality shows, but yet though, so it's like there's good and bad in that because then also back then there was no such thing as therapy, right? I mean,
yeah.
therapy, the only people that would go to therapy is when you were committed and like, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So there was no proactivity, there was no coaching, there was no therapy, right? And there's just nothing around. So we kind of like switched problems in a sense.
Okay.
But I think nowadays people are so good, to your point before, are so good at faking their own happiness that A, they don't even spend the time. Like if they actually spent the time that they take faking things to actually work on themselves, that would be a
Yeah.
difference. But then another problem in it is that you lose who you actually are because you're trying to be something else, a different persona, right? Everyone wants to be famous online. They're doing that and trying to be something that they're not actually. So then at some point you wake up and you're like, who am I really then? Because I'm not what I used to be, but I'm not quite this person either because this is a persona. Who am I actually? Right? Because we're all trying to blend in so badly. We don't want to be that sort of like sharp tack that people are like, whoa, what's that? We all just want to like blend in because if we blend in, at least no one will say anything. It's a problem because you become boring and watered down, and we don't take advantage of opportunities. Like part of what I found so interesting about the work that I did on myself, looking at sort of who I was then to who I am now, I'm a totally different person. Right. I mean,
Correct.
I
Yeah.
used to be like super shy, insecure, awkward, etc. And I don't know that people would really define me like that because I was actually at dinner a couple nights ago with some girlfriends from growing up, and they were like, I didn't see that at all. I felt that way. So it almost doesn't matter what they think. I mean, it's sweet, I appreciate that. But I definitely felt that way, for a long time. I think, and being who I am now, it's like I never would have thought that that girl would have ended up, in this position in so many ways, right? I mean, there are a lot of things, even in my business now, that are hard for me to do. That are super easy for other people, but I do it because I act as if, it's thinking about that 2.0 version of myself. Am I being the 2.0 version of myself? And I think about it constantly. And when I call myself out, I'm like, okay, I'm not. I don't do it in a judgy way because that doesn't help. It's more like, okay, like how did I get here? How do I undo what just happened? But again, to your point, we don't hold ourselves accountable to anything because we're afraid to do that. And we're not aware enough to be able to do that. Like self-awareness is a skill and it can be learned by anyone, but you have to want to. And there's accountability in some of that, obviously, and saying like, hey, that wasn't really the greatest way I handled that. Let me rethink that. Let me try to like figure that out, make that right, not do that again and learn from it. People aren't willing to do that. They'd rather be defensive. They'd rather, place blame on the other person. Like that's part of what's happening in romantic relationships as well. We just suck at relationships because all of our inner shit comes out. So while we think we're hiding it and faking it so well, in some ways we do, and in other ways we don't. And considering our romantic relationships are our most intimate, like there's nowhere to hide. It all comes out eventually, whether it's sooner
Yeah.
or
So,
later.
so let's get into this, right? We talk about the self, and then it ultimately goes, the end goal is romance, but there's a lot of things that go in between, like friendship, our professional lives, and our family.
Yeah,
And then we get to romance. And I don't want to just jump into romance because we have to remember those, the meat in the middle there, the friendships, the professional, and the family.
sure.
But like I love love. I think it's just a beautiful thing. We have to learn how to love ourselves.
Mhm.
Do you love your friends? Do you love your family? Do you love your work? I don't know why people have such a bad relationship with work, and then you expect like your romance life to just take off. So, my thinking, and this is where I'm just saying this, correct me if I'm wrong, don't I have to love all of those areas to then attract a great love in my life?
That's exactly why it matters. Because I was looking at some people, two, let's say, out of the five are like insane, right? Like they couldn't be better. Like people would die to have, that success in whatever those areas are. But then the
Yeah.
other ones are like shit. You know what I mean? Like there's a huge dichotomy for almost everyone, right? Where like, let's say they're killing it, in the success department. Their family is really great, but they have no friendships and they can't get a romantic, partner, like anything to stick. And it's like, hmm. So first of all, I saw like a huge dichotomy, right, which is quite interesting. And we neglect the areas that we don't do well in because we just don't want to like deal with it, right? Like I was saying, we only want to see like the pretty happy stuff. Um, so that's part of the problem. But we also don't know, like no one sits down and thinks like, like what's going well in each of these areas and what's not going well? And how do I hold myself accountable every week to turning, some of those things around? And we always like, oh, I really like want to do this or I really want to do that. And then 3 years later, they're saying the same thing. So we
Yeah.
need to be able to, if you want to attract someone really in any area of your life, but let's say romantically, who's high quality, you need to be high quality. It doesn't make sense to have someone who you think, quote unquote, has it all, but then most of those areas are kind of not great in your own life. It doesn't make sense, right? Like you're just not going to attract that. High quality people work hard at becoming high quality. It doesn't make sense if you're not doing the work, but you're expecting someone else to, and it's not going to rub off, by the way. We just are lazy. I mean, I hate to say that, but I think we're overworked in certain areas of our lives and spend a lot of focus and time on that. And work is obviously super important. It's one of like the best things, most fulfilling things that I do, but I also need to put better boundaries in, even now, there's times where I'm like, all right, got to turn it off. Um, because if it's at the expense of something else in your life, it doesn't make sense. I have peers that are incredibly wealthy, incredibly successful, but when you look in their life, right, like it all looks so sexy and like so amazing and like, something everyone would want. But then when you look into their lives, and I found that very early on where I was like, oh my God, the Bentley and this huge house and wow, like I can't imagine. And, all the press and blah, blah, blah. But then you look in their life, it was empty. They had no one to celebrate any of it with, right? There's no partner, very little friends. You have to question everyone who's in your life because a lot of them is like, it's business dealings and everything else. There's nothing genuine and they have no one to share it with. And then when I sort of pick that apart and pull them, pull it all out of them, they're like, yeah, it's pretty fucking miserable. It's really interesting, where I find that a lot of the wealthiest people I know are the most unhappy. And it's like, huh? You know what I mean? Like that's what everyone strives for in theory, but we're all very mechanical, very routine oriented. And I don't think a routine is bad, but what's the routine? Is it actually helping you or is it hurting you? Is it moving you towards the 2.0 or is it more towards the 1.0? But to your point, part of the reason why relationships suck is because we're not doing the freaking work, right? Like if you don't like yourself, you don't have good friends, you don't have a great family life, you hate your job, like how are you going to be a happy person? You're going to bring all of that home to your partner and overwhelm them with it. And then you kind of trauma bond over shit that sucks. I've been in relationships like that.
Well, I think also too, if we talk about, there's the mechanics behind relationships with work. Like there's stuff that you do at work and then you can overdo it. But then, I had a great conversation with a doctor the other day, and she was explaining there's mechanics and then there's energetics. So that's completely different. Like I can mechanically do at work, but I still have to emotionally and my energy has to be grateful for my work. I have to have joy in what I do. It has to give me a sense of peace.
Yeah.
And the same is true for, and that's what's going to transcend when that's well, then I can have like a good, healthy relationship with my family because they're not trying to ruin my professional life because they're like, why are you never around? Or my romantic life because I'm competing with my family and my business and my romance. Like, do you believe in those two differences? Because I think for a lot of us, we're just doing,
Yeah.
but that's what being is. Like, are you at peace? Do you have joy in what you do? I'm really big on just being grateful for the things that are around me, even if they're not bad. I have to sit there and find something to be grateful for, to be like, this happened to me for a reason. And let me just find that and take that joy with me where I go into the next phase.
Yes. And I find that a lot of us look at what's wrong in everything
Yeah.
versus what's good. I didn't get this promotion. Looking in the mirror, even, right? We look at what's bad. We don't look at what's going well, right? We're like, oh, like I have really beautiful eyes and like I have such a beautiful smile. It's like, oh, like this looks bad, that looks bad. We
Yeah.
always tend
I
to
have
pull
one
towards
line here that no one sees, and why am I focused on that? No one cares.
right. Right. I mean, no one notices the things that you notice because you're the one staring at yourself, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it makes sense, but we are our own worst critic. But when you have that energy behind you, that's where abundance comes. When you have that gratefulness, even last night, I was having tech issues on a lot of different things, on the back end, and I don't know a ton about this stuff. So I'm on with my team, multiple people till very late last night. And I'm like, why am I having to do this? It's 11:30 at night. I'm trying to figure this out because there's people in different time zones, et cetera, et cetera. And it's still not worked out, by the way. Hoping today. But to your point, I'm exhausted. I'm like, oh my God, I have to go to sleep, So it's probably like 12:30. I have to be up super early because of my kids. And exactly like you said, I didn't want to go to sleep with being like, fuck this, this is whatever. And just being really upset because obviously it's incredibly frustrating. Instead, I said exactly that. Like, first of all, I chose to have my own business, right? So if I wanted to work a 9 to 5, I could go do that.
Mm.
So there's that accountability as well. It's like, I created this, I wanted this. So careful what you wish for. And second, like, I'm so beyond grateful. And I feel like I just sound sort of woo-woo silly, so I don't even say it that often. But I am
I think you
obsessed
should say
with what I do
it.
for a
Yeah.
living. Like, and again, some of the back end stuff I don't like. I last night, right? Like, don't love that part. But I so love transforming people's lives. Like, I don't think that you could do anything better in my mind. Like, there's very few things besides maybe saving someone's life from like a doctor perspective.
Yeah.
I absolutely love what I do. I almost can't believe that this is what I'm able to do. It's 100% what I was supposed to do. I just am so passionate and grateful. And I think about that sometimes, to your point, where if I didn't have this, I'm like, I have two super young kids and I got a husband and he just started a brick and mortar, and like there's just so much going on. So it's like it's total chaos over here and I work like an animal. But part of why I work as hard as I do and why I don't find it to be as sort of sucking, the life out of me, because people are like, how the hell do you do this every day? I so love what I do. Like, I absolutely love it. And if I don't get a client that's like, you changed my life, or like some sort of huge thing every day, right? Literally every single day, I'm like, okay, what did I do wrong here? And not in like a I'll never be enough kind of way, but like I need to make more impact. Like, what can I shift and change and hold myself accountable to as I do my clients, with their own transformation? Like, what am I not doing right? But I love the fact that I'm able to every day move the needle forward for my clients. Like, there's just, and it almost motivates me to motivate them, if that makes sense. And there's a lot of mirroring going on because a lot of the themes and things that I'm focused on, I really like drill into my clients. So it's like this real kind of like cool accountability, type of thing. But yes, you need to appreciate where things are, because I used to be a glass half empty person and I didn't have room even to look at anything positive or happy. And there was a lot to be said about, but when you stay in that, and I wasn't really a victim, right? Like, I didn't play a lot of that, but I was just always sad and mad. Like, I had a lot of pent up stuff inside because, like I said, I never got help for it. I never got proper help for it, let's say. So when you're able to put that somewhere and get that out of you, you don't feel sick anymore. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was always toxic
Totally.
air that like was just inside me. So to your point with the energy, it's not even just the gratitude piece. It's like how you show up with, from like your body language to the energy, right? Like, you can feel people's presence, good and bad, right? When you see someone, you're like, I like you. And not again, sexually, just like in general, you're like, wow, there's something really attractive about you. Versus not, like something just doesn't feel right sometimes. When you speak to someone, you're like, ooh, like the energy's off, like it just doesn't feel right. And you don't need to be super woo-woo or super intuitive to do that. Like, yes, I see kind of beyond what's like normal, but from a normal, person, you can feel all of that. But that's all your internal shit, is my point. Because how would a narcissist on a first date be able to suck your ass in? Right? You didn't say
Oh
anything.
yeah, they know.
Oh, I'm
They
a
know.
people
They're like
pleaser.
scanning for their victims.
Right? Like, please, I'm a people pleaser. Like, please choose me. Like, that's not what's happening. But like, there's this like communication without realizing it. And that's the bleeding. So it's
Yeah.
not this like red, blood like we have where it's very obvious. It's not. It's like odorless. Like, you can't feel it. You can't, but like, you yourself, but you're emoting all of it. And it matters, bad business dealings. You're emoting that. Like,
Yeah.
all of this happens for a reason. Like, the way that your life is right now, good and bad, all of it, like, that's on you. You take full credit for it. And even though, like I said, a lot of our trauma, we didn't choose our families, we didn't choose our situations, we didn't choose our trauma, we didn't choose our vices, like we didn't choose any of these things. A lot of them, like I said, are generational. I see my daughter, she's 3. She not only looks exactly like me, but she acts exactly like me. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even screw you up yet. Like, it's really quite wild. But like, it's up to me to change some of that. And I see the good, because I mean, it's me. So like, I see the good and I see the bad. I'm like, okay, so like, how do I figure out the best way to change the things that are not so good and kind of veer her in a different direction? But we have to take accountability, or we're never going to see anything different. And we're going to continue to be, that byproduct of where we came from. And like you said, it's instead of continuing to write chapter after chapter after chapter from just how it all happened without our control, without our authority, how is it going to be for you? right? I mean, you take the pen, right? I mean, it's your life. And as much as we say like, oh, we really don't have a lot of control. Like, yeah, over certain things, sure. But we really have a lot of control if you think about it over a lot of things in our life, actually, from like small details to bigger things. It's up to you. But if something isn't making you happy, there's a problem. And you need to be able to, without attacking yourself, say, hey, this doesn't feel great. I think we need to do something about it and take a look and decide what needs to happen in order to make it better. It's not going to happen by itself. And anyone that you're envious of right now, and we all are in, different areas, they did something that you didn't do yet. And knowing that what it is helpful, and knowing that someone else has actually done it is also really helpful. It's inspiring versus being like, fucking asshole, and just being mad about it and spiteful. Do something to change it. Besides my height, I'm vertically challenged. I'm 5'1". There's not much I can do about that besides heels. But there's so many things that I could do something about. So when I feel that sort of like tinge, when I see something, in person, or if I see someone online, whatever it is, I'm like, God damn it, I want that. Great, let's fucking do it, right? Before I would say like, that's for them, it's not for me.
Yeah. And that's knowing yourself and knowing what you really want versus like looking at someone else and saying, oh, they're doing that. Could I do that? I always say, like, I don't want to do what you're doing. Like, I just want to
Right.
do
And
what
do it
I'm
in your
doing.
own way.
Yeah,
Right.
for
So like,
sure.
if it's something they have, let's say, it's their career, let's just make it easy. Great. Like, what about it? Right. I'm sure, it's not necessarily what exactly they're doing, but it's more of like the accolades and rewards. And again, that comes with pain, right? Like most people don't just become successful overnight unless they take over, generally someone else's business or hit some odd stroke of luck. It's really fucking hard. And I think a lot of people think that, it was luck or my family paid for something or what. Like, no, this was all built by myself. Like I said to you, I literally started with one client who was actually an ex-boyfriend of mine, which is kind of funny. And I'm like, you need me. And I think we need to start this business now. But you know what I'm saying? Like, none of this is easy, but nor is being in your own pain, having high anxiety, not sleeping at all, overthinking, hating yourself, making shitty decisions. Like, does that seem easy to do? Like, no. So if you're going to do more or less the same amount of work, doesn't it make sense to actually work on yourself and do things that help you instead of hurt you and move you forward instead of move you backward or just sort of sitting, in your crap? Like, let's get out of what you built based on old shit, right? I mean, think about how many, mentors and peers and teachers and coaches and parents and all the people of authority that we listen to that said some stupid thing at some point. Like we don't even realize often what it is that we look through that lens, which is why people through hypnotherapy. It's exactly why, right? Where people are like, I feel this way or I feel this way about something, some belief about something, whether it's money or our worth or life or love or whatever it is. And then we go to that place and it's, something that happened when you were 8 years old and it wasn't some huge traumatic thing. It can be, obviously. But oftentimes it's something small that someone said once, one sentence when you were a little kid, and we're expected to believe what authority says. So we believe it, we internalize it, and we look for proof that that's true constantly and live through that lens from when we were, let's say, 7 years old, call you 40 something now. It's 40 something years of garbage that you're now looking through because someone else said something because of projection and stupid, crap on their own end. And now we're ruining our lives because of it. Like you have to be able
And
to separate.
hypnotherapy erase that.
It can. It depends on who you go to, obviously, and how much you want to change. Like you can't go into hypnotherapy like you will not change me. Go. You know what I mean? Like you have to want to have to
Why does
be.
that happen? Why physiologically do they need, like, what in the brain do they need to have happen so that they can enter to then kind of scrub you so that you can be rebuilt with a clean, fresh slate?
You have to want to, just like I will not work with a client that doesn't want to do it. So if a wife, drags a husband, if a husband drags a wife, if someone says like, hey, my mom really wants me to do this, or like, hey, whoever, right? If it's not really
Yeah.
coming from them, and you can be scared, like I said, you can be scared of shit to do something like I respect that. Most people should be, because like big shit's coming. But when you are dragged to do something, it makes no sense. So you need to want, like, at least have the desire to do something, because if you're locked out, like, you can't get to your subconscious. Like, someone else, you have to be very open, but you have to be very open to everything, really. But we're
Yeah.
very closed off people. Part of the reason why love doesn't happen is because we got hurt at some point. We got our heart broken. It could have been when we were little, and